There is a wound you carry. You know the one. Perhaps it lives in your relationships, the place where you reach for connection and find instead the echo of an old rejection. Perhaps it lives in your voice, the moment you go to speak your truth and feel your throat close around silence. Perhaps it lives in your body, your work, your sense of deserving. The astrologers who work with Chiron, that strange planetoid orbiting between Saturn and Uranus, call this the sacred wound, the place where you are broken open, the place that becomes, paradoxically, your gift to the world. The wounded healer, they say. You teach what you most needed to learn. But what if I told you that Neville Goddard, who rarely, if ever, mentioned astrology in his recorded lectures, held the key to dissolving that wound entirely, not by healing it over time, not by integrating it through therapy or spiritual practice, but by assuming it never existed in the first place? What if the Chironic wound is not a cosmic mark you must carry, but a pattern you have unconsciously agreed to repeat? And what if the moment you assume wholeness, the entire architecture of that wound collapses? This is not about transcending the wound. This is about recognizing that you were never wounded at all. Welcome to Neville Goddard Universe. I'm so glad you're here. This is a space where we explore Neville Goddard's teachings, not as isolated wisdom, but as part of a living system of truth, one that resonates across the great esoteric and mystical traditions of the world. Each episode, we take a concept from Neville and illuminate it through a parallel language: the law of attraction, Hermetic principles, Kabbalah, the tarot, astrology, depth psychology, quantum theory. Neville is always our anchor. But we let the other traditions speak, because when they do, we hear Neville's voice echoing back, and we realize how ancient, how universal, and how profoundly practical his teaching truly is. Today, we're exploring something deeply personal and wildly transformative: the relationship between Chiron, the wounded healer of astrology, and Neville's radical assumption of wholeness. We're going to look at how the astrological wound pattern in your natal chart is not a fate you must accept, but a script you can revise by daring to assume you are healed. And we're going to touch on Neville's late teachings from the 1970s, where he spoke of Christ's healing miracles, not as historical events, but as demonstrations of assumption power, the power you hold right now, reading these words. If you've ever felt marked by something, a pattern you can't shake, a wound that defines you, a chironic signature that feels like your burden and your calling, this episode is for you. And if this exploration resonates, if it opens something in you, I would be deeply grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video or subscribe to the channel. Every mind that walks this path with us keeps this work alive, and I thank you for being here. Let's begin. Neville Goddard's entire teaching can be distilled into a single, shattering insight. Consciousness is the only reality, not matter, not circumstance, not even the body, consciousness. And because consciousness is the only reality, the state you assume now, the feeling, the identity, the conviction you occupy in this moment, is the only thing that shapes what you experience as your world. This is not metaphor. This is not positive thinking layered over a material world. This is ontology. This is the structure of reality itself. And here is where Neville goes further than almost any other teacher. He tells you that assumption hardens into fact. You do not need to deserve it. You do not need to heal your way toward it. You do not need to earn it through years of spiritual practice or therapy or shadow work. You assume the state of the wish fulfilled. You dare to feel it real now. And the subconscious mind, which Neville calls God, must and will comply. In his book, The Power of Awareness, Neville writes, "The assumption of the wish fulfilled is the ship that carries you over the unknown seas to the fulfillment of your desire. Not the healing of your wound, not the integration of your shadow. The assumption. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a woman who has carried a wound around rejection her entire life. In every relationship, romantic or otherwise, she finds herself bracing for abandonment. She sees it coming. She feels it in her body. And because she assumes it, because she occupies the state of, I am someone who gets left. The world mirrors it back to her. The relationships end. The pattern repeats. The astrologer looks at her chart and says, ah, Chiron in the 7th house, the wound of partnership. You're here to heal this and teach others about intimacy. And that may be true in one framework. But Neville would say something else entirely. He would say, assume you are loved now, not work on your wound until you're ready to be loved. Not integrate your Chiron so that you can attract a healthy partner. Assume it now. Dare to occupy the state of being loved, cherished, chosen, and persist in that assumption. Feel it. Live from it. Let the subconscious, which knows no time and cannot argue with the state you occupy, reorganize your entire reality to match it. This is not denial. This is not bypassing. This is the recognition that the wound itself is not a fact of your being. It is a state you have been occupying. And states can be changed. Neville says it again and again. You are not bound by the facts of your life. You are bound by the state you occupy. The wound is a fact only insofar as you continue to assume it. The moment you assume wholeness, the wound ceases to be. I want you to feel the radicality of this. In most spiritual traditions, there is a journey. There is a process. You are broken, and through time and effort and grace, you are made whole. The hero's journey. The alchemical transformation. The dark night of the soul that leads to union. Neville collapses all of that. He says, assume the end. Assume you are already whole. Assume you are already healed. Assume the miracle is already done. And the subconscious, which is infinite and omnipotent, and cannot refuse the state you inhabit, will produce the means, the events, the circumstances that make it so. In one of his 1970s lectures, near the end of his life, when his teaching had become almost entirely apocalyptic, entirely Christological, Neville spoke about the healing miracles in the Gospels. He said that when Jesus told the paralytic, "Rise, take up your bed and walk," it was not because the man had healed over time. It was because Jesus saw him as already whole. Jesus assumed the man's wholeness, and the man's body, which is merely an objectification of consciousness, had no choice but to comply. And then Neville said this, and I want you to hear it clearly. You are that Jesus. You are the one who looks upon yourself or another and assumes wholeness, and the moment you do, the healing is done. This is not metaphor. This is instruction. So when we turn to astrology and the concept of Chiron, we are not dismissing it. We are asking, what if the Chironic wound is simply a state you have been occupying? And what if the moment you assume wholeness, the entire pattern dissolves? Not because you healed it, but because you stopped assuming it was there. In astrology, Chiron is known as the wounded healer. Discovered in 1977, right around the time Neville was giving those late, mystical lectures, Chiron orbits between Saturn, the planet of limitation and structure, and Uranus, the planet of awakening and breakthrough. Symbolically, it represents the place where you carry a wound that does not heal in the ordinary way. It is the psychic wound, the soul wound, the place where you were hurt early and deeply, and where you continue to encounter that same hurt in different forms throughout your life. But here is the gift. According to astrological tradition, the Chironic wound is also your teaching. It is the place where, through your own struggle, you gain the insight and compassion to guide others. You become the wounded healer. You teach what you most needed to learn. If Chiron is in your 7th house, the house of partnership, you carry a wound around intimacy and connection, and you become the one who teaches others about healthy relating. If Chiron is in your 10th house, the house of career and public role, you carry a wound around being seen and valued, and you become the one who helps others step into their calling. The wound becomes the gift. And there is deep truth in this. I do not want to dismiss it. Many of us have taught what we most needed to learn. Many of us have turned our pain into purpose. But Neville would ask, why must you carry the wound at all? And this is where the two traditions meet, not in opposition, but in a deeper recognition. Astrology, at its highest, is a symbolic map of consciousness. Your natal chart is not a fate imposed upon you by the stars. It is a reflection of the state of consciousness you inhabited at the moment of your birth. The planets do not cause anything. They signify. They mirror. As above, so below. As within, so without. And if the chart is a map of consciousness, then every signature in that chart, including Chiron, is not a cosmic decree, but a spattern. And patterns, Neville tells us, are simply states that have been assumed and repeated. Here is the Hermetic principle, drawn from the Kybalion, that every astrologer knows. The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. And this one, the ALL, is mind. The universe is mental. The astrologers of old understood what Neville teaches. The outer world, including the sky itself, is a reflection of the inner world. The wound you carry in your chart is not in the stars. It is in your consciousness. The stars simply reflect it back. So when you look at Chiron in your chart and you see the wound of rejection, or abandonment, or unworthiness, or voicelessness, what you are seeing is not a cosmic injury you must heal over time. You are seeing a state you have been occupying. And the moment you assume a different state, the moment you dare to assume wholeness, belovedness, worthiness, now, the entire pattern shifts. This is Neville's astrological secret. Though he never framed it that way, the chart does not bind you. The state you assume does. Let me give you an example. I once knew a man with Chiron in the second house, the house of self-worth and resources. His entire life, he struggled with money. He felt unworthy of abundance. He worked hard, saved carefully, and still found himself in lack. He consulted an astrologer who told him, "You carry the Chironic wound of self-worth. You're here to heal your relationship with value, and once you do, you'll teach others about abundance." And he tried. He did the healing work. He journaled. He did inner child work. He worked with affirmations. And nothing changed, because he was assuming the wound. He was occupying the state of, "I am someone who must heal before I can have." Then he encountered Neville's teaching. And instead of trying to heal the wound, he did something else. He assumed he was already abundant. He sat in his imagination every night and felt what it would be like to have more than enough. He didn't affirm it. He didn't chase it. He didn't try to heal his way toward it. He simply assumed it. He occupied the state of abundance. Within 3 months, his circumstances had completely reorganized. An unexpected opportunity, a debt forgiven, a raise he hadn't asked for. The outer world reflected the inner state he had dared to assume. And here is the key. The Chiron placement did not change. The wound was still there in his chart, but it ceased to operate in his life because he stopped assuming it. The pattern dissolved. This is what Neville means when he says, "The world is yourself pushed out." The wound you see in your chart, the hurt you carry in your body, the pattern you repeat in your relationships. These are not external facts. They are externalizations of the state you occupy. And the moment you occupy a different state, the externalization changes. So when the astrologer says, "Chiron is your wound and your teaching," Neville adds, "only if you assume it to be so." You are not here to integrate the wound. You are here to realize you were never wounded. You are here to assume wholeness and let the subconscious produce the evidence. And this brings us back to that thumbnail you clicked on. You are already whole. Not, you will be whole once you heal. Not, you can become whole through practice. You are already whole. The wound is a costume you've been wearing. The moment you assume wholeness, the costume falls away. So how do you do this? How do you assume wholeness when the wound feels so real, so present, so confirmed by your history and your chart and your lived experience? Neville gives us the method. It is simple. It is not easy, but it is simple. You go to the end. you assume the state of the wish fulfilled, in this case the state of wholeness, and you persist in that assumption until it hardens into fact. Here is how you do it, step by step. First, identify the wound, name it, not to dwell on it, but to know what state you are leaving behind. Perhaps it is the wound of rejection. Perhaps it is the wound of invisibility. Perhaps it is the wound of scarcity, or shame, or voicelessness. Look at your Chiron placement if you know it. Look at the pattern in your life. Name it clearly. Second, define the opposite state. If the wound is rejection, the opposite state is being chosen. If the wound is invisibility, the opposite state is being seen and celebrated. If the wound is scarcity, the opposite state is abundance. If the wound is shame, the opposite state is worthiness. Do not define it as healed or integrated. Define it as the state you would occupy if the wound had never existed. Third, construct a simple scene that implies you are already in that state. This is Neville's method. You do not imagine the healing process. You do not imagine the journey. You imagine the end. W. You imagine a scene that could only occur if you were already whole. If your wound is rejection, imagine a close friend or loved one saying to you with warmth and certainty, "You are so loved." Feel their hand on yours. Hear the tone of their voice. Let it be real. If your wound is scarcity, imagine checking your bank balance and feeling a deep, quiet sense of abundance, not just the number, but the feeling of having more than enough. If your wound is voicelessness, imagine speaking your truth in a room full of people and feeling the power of your own voice, the resonance of being heard. Keep the scene simple. 3-4 seconds. Make it sensory. Feel it, hear it, touch it. Fourth, enter into the scene just before sleep, in what Neville calls the state akin to sleep, or SATS. Lie down in bed, relax your body. Let your mind grow drowsy, and then, gently, vividly, step into the scene. Do not watch it from the outside. Live it. Be there. Feel it from the first person. Loop it gently, without strain, until you fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, in the feeling of wholeness. Do this every night. Persist. Neville says, a little one becomes 1,000. The first night, it may feel like fantasy. The second night, a little more real. By the third week, the assumption begins to feel natural. And the subconscious, which knows nothing but the state you occupy, begins to reorganize your world to match it. Fifth, during the day, whenever the old pattern reasserts itself, whenever you feel the wound, whenever the chironic ache returns, do not fight it. Do not shame yourself for feeling it. Simply remember, I am whole. I am assuming wholeness. This feeling is an echo of an old state. It is not who I am now. Gently redirect your attention to the state you are choosing to occupy. Feel it, even for a moment. Let the assumption take root. This is not affirmation. This is not willpower. This is assumption. You are not trying to convince yourself. You are simply occupying a state. And states, when occupied persistently, harden into fact. And here is where the astrological perspective enriches the practice. When you know your Chiron placement, you know exactly where to apply the assumption. You know the specific flavor of the wound, the specific area of life where it operates, and you can craft your scene to match it precisely. Chiron in the 4th house, the house of home and belonging. Imagine being embraced by family, fully accepted. Chiron in the 3rd house, the house of communication. Imagine your words landing, your message received. The chart becomes a map, not of fate, but of focus. It tells you where to direct your assumption. This is Neville's method. Always go to the end. Assume it is done. Persist. And let the subconscious, which Neville calls God, produce the evidence. So what does it mean that two traditions, astrology, an ancient symbolic language mapping the heavens, and Neville Goddard's radical teaching of consciousness as the only reality, arrive at the same place? It means this: the universe is not a collection of separate things acting upon you. The stars are not distant forces imposing a fate. The wound is not a cosmic mark you must carry. All of it, the chart, the planets, the wound, the healing, the world, all of it is consciousness. All of it is you. Astrology, at its highest, has always known this. The Hermetic axiom as above, so below, does not mean the stars control you. It means the stars reflect you. The macrocosm mirrors the microcosm. The outer universe is the inner universe made visible. And Neville, who likely never cast a natal chart in his life, taught the same truth from a different angle. The world is yourself pushed out. Consciousness is the only reality. What you assume within, you experience without. So when you look at Chiron in your chart and you see the wound, you are not seeing a destiny imposed upon you by the cosmos. You are seeing a reflection of a state you have been occupying. The wound is not in the stars. The wound is in consciousness. And consciousness can be changed. This is why traditions separated by centuries and cultures keep arriving at the same place. Because they are all describing the same reality, the primacy of consciousness, the infinite plasticity of the inner world, the power of assumption to shape experience. The Kabbalists called it the world of Yetzirah, the formative world where thought takes shape before it manifests. The Vedantists called it Maya, the play of consciousness projecting itself as world. The Hermeticists called it the ALL is mind. The quantum physicists call it the observer effect, the collapse of the wave function into particle based on observation. Neville called it assumption. And when you realize that Chiron, that strange planetoid between limitation and awakening, is not a cosmic wound, but a chimeras of the state you occupy, when you realize that the moment you assume wholeness, the wound ceases to operate, you understand why Neville rarely mentioned astrology. He didn't need to. He was teaching the principle that underlies all symbolic systems. Consciousness is the only reality, and assumption is the key. The wounded healer archetype is true, but only if you choose to occupy it. You can also choose to occupy wholeness. And the chart, the cosmos, the body, the world, all of it will comply. This is the secret. You are not healing the wound. You are realizing it was never real. If this exploration has opened something in you, if it's given you a new way to see your wound or your chart or your power, I would be so grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video or subscribe to the channel. Every person who walks this path with us keeps this work alive, and I thank you for being here. You are already whole. Not because you have healed every hurt, or integrated every shadow, or resolved every chironic theme in your chart. You are already whole because wholeness is your nature. The wound was a state you occupied. The hurt was a story you told. The limitation was an assumption you inherited and repeated. And the moment you dare to assume wholeness now, the entire architecture of the wound collapses. Not over time, not through process, now. This is what Neville meant when he said consciousness is the only reality. This is what he meant when he said assumption hardens into fact. The subconscious does not care about your history. It does not care about your chart. It cares only about the state you occupy in this moment. Assume you are whole. Persist in that assumption, and watch the world reorganize itself to reflect it back to you. Tonight, before you sleep, do not ask to be healed. Do not beg for the wound to close. Simply assume it is already done. Construct a scene that implies wholeness. Feel it, live it, fall asleep in the feeling of it. Let the infinite intelligence within you, which Neville calls God, produce the evidence. You are not waiting to be made whole. You are recognizing that you never stopped being whole. The wound was a costume. The pattern was a script, and you are the author. The stars do not bind you. The chart does not define you. The wound does not own you. Consciousness is the only reality, and you are that consciousness, infinite and free. Assume the state of wholeness, and let the heavens themselves rearrange to match the truth you have dared to claim. You are already whole. You have always been whole. And the moment you assume it, the universe has no choice but to agree.